Hi guys, I'm Cutter Streeby with ohalart.com. I'm with Victoria Chang. Happy to have her here. Victoria Chang's new book of poetry, Obit, was published by Copper Canyon Press in 2020 and was nominated for a National Book Award, as well as named Time Magazine Publishers Weekly and NPR Best Book of the Year and a New York Times Notable Book. Other poetry books are Barbie Chang, The Boss, Salvinia Molesta, and Circle. She's also at an anthology, Asian American Poetry, The Next Generation. Thanks for being here again. So in Obit, I've read all of the interviews that you've done previously, but for our readership, can you kind of tell us a little bit about why you didn't want to go the traditional elegy route and start there for us?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the elegy is a traditional poem that so many people have written throughout history that it just seemed like I couldn't really write any better elegy than anyone else. So it's not that I gave up trying, sort of thing, but I just feel like I couldn't really do it justice. And then thinking back on it, I guess, too, my experience with grief and death it felt different than maybe other people's. And I think everyone's grief is always different. But my mom had been sick for so long, and then my dad had also been sick for so long that it's like they were both sick at the same time, and it just felt like the elegy form wouldn't work, and so I just didn't want to try it. But so I just didn't, and I also didn't want to sort of commercialize my mother's passing. I felt like I just didn't want to write about it. And but yeah, it wasn't until I heard the NPR episode that they were talking about that documentary they made called Obit on obituary writers that I just I'm not sure what happened. I just went home. I didn't think about the obituary form, but I did remember thinking, wow, yeah, everything dies, when someone dies, everything dies, so many little things die on a daily basis. And then I just went home and I just started writing little things that died. So I don't think it took the obituary form until a long time after that, but it was something about that word got me thinking about my experiences with grief. And it was so micro, so small. Every day it was something different that had died, sort of thing. So that's kind of, I think, when I started writing these poems. And eventually they took a shape. I think when they got transferred from the notebook to the computers, maybe when I started shaping them into the obituary form.
Cool. And this collection is different than your last two collections. The line breaks in Barbie Chang, and in The Boss. I was watching one of your interviews, and you said that you wrote The Boss in really long couplets, and then McSweeney's is the one that pushed it to quatrains. For Obit, when you were drafting just in prose form, so it was open-ended?
Yeah, I'll just have a composition notebook and just write till the very end. I don't really think about line breaks. Yeah, and I think that the Obit poems are prose poems, so I never had to think about line breaks. It was quite the cool thing, actually. But for Barbie Chang and for Barbie Chang, I definitely also wrote straight across, so it just looks like just a bunch of text that fills a page. And then I'll start thinking about other things once it makes it onto a computer, kind of thing. And for The Boss, they were actually long. Same thing. Yeah, I don't even think they were in couplets or anything. I just kind of write. It almost looks like a random free-write journal.
Cool.
That's how my poems start. Yeah. And then eventually, unless I'm writing, so lately I have this other manuscript that I've been working on that are syllabic poems. So they're all tiny poems, because I've always wanted, I love tiny poems, but it's not a lot of people write tiny poems, and they're really hard to write. So I have a whole manuscript of tiny poems, and they're in syllables, like different syllabics. And so in that way, then I have to actually write, because you can only have so many syllables. So, so if you make it linear, then right away while you're counting syllables on your fingers, kind of thing. But otherwise, I just write, like free write, pretty much straight. Yeah.
And so for Obit, did you know that you were going to write in the prose poem format, or did you just start writing and it felt like that's where it's supposed to go?
Yeah, I think I didn't think about it. I was just writing, and I have a whole notebook somewhere that literally is just filled with just writing.
Cool.
Straight, just like the whole notebook is just filled. And I don't think that I really don't think that until it made it onto the computer did I start really thinking about, okay, like how do I want to make this? And I think I remember messing around with things, like I love to play. So it's part of me is just like, try this, I'm always spewing out new ideas, in my job, in my daily life. It's just my personality drives people crazy. But I do think like, how about that? How about this? How about this? And so when I'm doing that myself, it's very much so, well, let's right, just about center. Let's move it. Like, 1.5 space in between, 2 space in, like, I just mess around a lot with stuff. And so, I think a lot of people think, okay, you decided you're going to write obituaries, you're going to make them this shape, and you wrote down and started doing, like, oh yeah, I'm not like that at all, in fact. But it does become a conceptual book after, and looking at it later, I imagine that's what people ask me. They're like, oh, when did it's like, oh no, it's like, for me, it's very process oriented. It's very organic, and I resist all notions of putting down a stake in the ground for anything. So it's like, if you're going to write down a 5-paragraph paper, you'd be like, this is my thesis. I resist all of that to the point where I force myself to develop as I go live.
Cool. That's different than I thought. I thought it was all pre-planned or something, and then and you wrote.
And it seems like it is when you look back at it. It's just like, oh yeah, I can see how that seems like it was totally pre-planned.
Yeah,
totally not.
But so for your process in finding the form for your content, you get the content first, and then you find the form in all in Barbie Chang and the Boss, same way. Wow,
yeah,
that's cool.
And I also kind of feel like that's because I handwrite, like it's hard to kind of do anything with handwriting. Like you could get scissors out and cut it, but I also think like I'm really interested in the writing. The writing is what matters the most, and I think the form is really important to the writing too, but it's like, I think that it doesn't always come immediately, but the things dying, little pieces of things dying was something I started sort of right away working on. So that was sort of like almost like a prompt, you give yourself a writing prompt every day kind of thing. It's like, I kind of gave myself a writing prompt every day or multiple times a day, because I wrote many of them a day, and something died, whatever it was, that was the prompt. And so it's like every one I wrote was something else died. And then the more I wrote them, the more it got kind of cool, like conceptual abstract things died, and then things would repeat. I would just let them keep, whatever happened. If something died 7 times, that's fine. If it only died once, that's fine too. If it came back to life, that's fine too. It's like whatever the process, like whatever happened. I just let it go wherever it wants to go.
Cool. That's probably going to help, some people that are struggling with, I'm stuck in a form and now what am I going to do? And then we could just excerpt you and just say, try everything and let it come organically.
That's true. It's uncomfortable for people, I think. But for me, it's hard for me to live within a lot of structure. I think I'm not a very structured person, like I'm just very messy and just not organized.
Yeah. So the middle section, I read that you. When did you know that you were gonna segment this out? Like, did you write the whole collection by hand and then move it, or did it come over piecemeal?
I think I wrote all those obituary poems were in a notebook, and I transferred them all into the computer. And then I kind of sort of, you do that kind of reassessment. It's like, well, where am I at? What am I doing? What is this that I'm making? And I was like, gosh, there's just too many of these. They're too uniform, but I'm so done writing these. I don't want to write anymore. And then at some point you start thinking, do I have a book here? Is this a book? Is this a manuscript? Is this something larger? Like, are these poems, right? And you have to ask yourself these questions, because I don't sit down and say I'm writing a poem. Like, I just write, and I'm very sort of genre free. And so I think at that point, after that, I was like, yeah, there are a lot of these, and they all look the same, or they sound kind of similar. And so how do I make a book? How do I make something that gives that makes whatever I have here larger than it currently is by itself? And that's when you start thinking about like how to add more stuff in there or take things out. And I had already started writing new poems after a while, just for fun. And then I had some old poems from another manuscript that never was published, but I had taken some of those poems from that manuscript and put them into Victoria Chang. So I was like, I have these other ones left. They're all elegies. But I wrote them as elegies for like my former life before I had children kind of thing. So they're elegies and those subjects. And I just took them all and took them out of their little couplets and made them 14 lines, which meant a lot of editing and taking things out, and reworking those entirely. They had been written maybe like 15 years ago, and then made them all 14-line fakes on it, and then put little asterisks between them and made them one long poem, which was sort of fun to do. It's a challenge. I'm like, can I make one long centerpiece for this book? And worked on those for a while, and then the poems at the end came when I had written a whole bunch of formal poems, like sonnets, pantoums, and stuff. And my friend was like, hey, these tankas are really cool. You should take them and spread them out to the manuscript, but all these other poems are bad. So I took the tankas and I separated them, and then put them in pairs for some reason. I'm not sure why. They seemed like they wanted to be together. And then kind of sprinkled them. I actually read my manuscript out loud like hundreds of times. And when I kind of felt like things were boring, or like I started losing interest in my own writing, sorry, my dog's barking, then I put some tankas, a set of tankas there, just to give the reader like a breather, including myself. And then I'd read them more, like, this is about time to put another set of tankas, kind of thing. And then I made sure they're ordered sort of how I wanted them to be, kind of thing. So that's how that whole book kind of came together.
It is really cool. And the other thing that I've heard you talk a lot about in your other interviews is during that editing process, when you were looking at these and thinking, like, what do I have here? Like, why will anybody care about this stuff? And you talked about how you were trying to access, your grief, but make it accessible to the universal. And
right.
What did that look like? Like, how did you go about getting that aerial view that you talk about?
Sure. Yeah. I think while I was writing these, I was always wondering who was going to care about my own personal experiences. And so much about my own life is so private, and I mean, everyone's is really. And but my own grief was private. I mean, I think a lot of people didn't even know like my mother was sick, and nobody really knows what pulmonary fibrosis is, and no one really cares. It's like, but it was such a big part of my life, and I felt like, when I started writing about it, I realized I wanted to keep going. But while I was writing, I just had that uncomfortable feeling like I was navel gazing. And so whenever I had that uncomfortable feeling I was navel gazing, I kind of felt myself almost have a gut reaction to it, and then start thinking larger. It was like, well, what is, like, thinking more about the human condition and what grief is, like, as a definition, and then so much of this process was like started by throughout, like, thinking like, okay, is it possible for me? Because nobody knows me really, right? And nobody knows what I live and what I go through and what I've gone through. And like, is it possible for me to explain these things? Like, if I had you or somebody else sitting in front of me, can I? Let's see, can I? It's an experiment, a science experiment. Can I explain to you how it felt and how it feels to grieve? And I was like, wow, that's a challenge, because those are really hard feelings to explain. So that's sort of where it all came from. So I think these poems were never really meant for myself, because I didn't know how I feel,
Yeah.
But I was like, can I make art out of my grief? Is it possible to use words to explain to people how it feels and how other people have felt? Sure. Like, I know, so, I mean, it's like, of course, I'm not the only person who's had a mother die, it's like, and I'm not the only person who's had like really sick people around them for a really long time. It's like, I go to, my dad's facility, now, and it's like, I look around at all the other, they're usually older than me though, I have to admit, because like my parents got sick when I was a little younger than the average person, and so the people at the facilities, they're like in their 50s and 60s, and their parents are like way in their 80s and 90s. And so when my parents got sick, I was still in my 30s. And so, I think that everyone, I don't know, I lost my train of thought, but everybody, has had these experiences, and they're everywhere is really, I think, what I was trying to say. But how was I going to explain it, or explain to people that maybe didn't know, but also explain to people that did experience it, and see if I could sort of have it like
connect,
get to something, connect. I wasn't gonna say get it right, but there's no such thing as right if I didn't say it, but connect and have them sort of have it resonate. Like, would they think I did them justice? Their feelings of grief, and could I even make art out of something that was so difficult? So that was sort of the process. Okay, those are things I was thinking about.
I think the answer is yes. Did it. Success. All right, kind of switching gears here. Where do you, when you're writing, because, maybe you could talk about your writing process, because I just, like, the people that the RO Hall readership, maybe they haven't read 45 Victoria Chang interviews, so what does the creation process look like to you?
In general?
In general, yeah. The feverish writing, and then the transfer and stuff.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, it's like, I think writing is really hard, but for me, it's like, I have such an obsessive personality. Like, once I get latched onto something, it's really hard for me to let it go. Like, it's impossible to peel me away from something that I'm really into. And so it's a problem, I have to say, in regular daily life, but and I actually think it arguably could be a problem in creative writing too. But like, I'll just get into these modes where I just, I can't do anything else. I can't focus on anything else. And it's like I get mad. It's the only thing I want to be doing with my time is doing whatever I'm doing. And so, that's sort of how I write. And how those things begin, I couldn't really tell you. I mean, I just, I think in these new poems that I started writing, actually, my friend was like, hey, I really like your short poems in this book, the Obit. I think you should write a book of short poems. And I was like, okay. And it was like one of 17 things that he's very sort of, he's a lot like me. He's like, all over the place. It's Ilya Kaminsky. So we're very similar, and he's kind of got this kind of weird sort of inventive entrepreneurial mind. Like, he's always full of ideas, brimming, and I'm kind of the same way. And he doesn't even remember telling me this. This is like, it was probably sandwiched between 17 other things that he was talking about. But I remembered it, and it's that stuck with me somehow. So it was an assignment. So this other book I've just finished is an assignment. Well, I'm still working on it, actually, but I've resurrected it to work on it again. But it was all an assignment. He said, write 40 pages of short poems. And I was like, okay. So I did. But I created my own parameters around that. And so I gave myself other restrictions. But I think for every sort of thing I'm working on is different. But it's like I have to be really wanting to do it, because I'm very much so, if I don't want to do it, I won't do it, you know. There are plenty of other things that I could be doing, but once I start, it's like I know it's if I like it, I'm not going to be able to stop, and that pretty much is like what happens. I just get so obsessed I can't stop, and then like, you know, 2 weeks later, 3 months later, 1 month later, whatever it is, I have like 50 pages or 100 pages or something. And I don't think it's a very healthy way to be, and I don't recommend it. And I think it's, you know, I kind of wish I could write a collection of poems over 10 years, you know, like one poem at a time. But I don't know how to be that way, you know. I'm very excitable about new things, and I'm always like shiny new things. And I'm also, I think, afraid that like I'm going to die, or like, I'm afraid that I'll get a stroke and my brain is going to be like my dad's, you know. So I think there's that fear. It's like, oh, I have to get all this down.
It's like a feverish drive.
Yeah. It's very feverish for sure. Yeah.
Cool. All right, this is something that you know, Christina Marie Darling and Jeffrey Levine kind of brought to my attention, and you're a proponent of it, and it's literary citizenship. You know, it's something that I think writers, if you went to grad school or if you have like a circle of writers that you work with, you understand it in those kind of terms where it's like, you know, I know this person, they published a book, let's do an interview, or let's do a XXX, whatever it is, but it's kind of limited in scope. And when I talked to him at Tupelo, it was like a whole different ball game. It was like, this is what you need to be doing. Like, it's part of the writing process. And they kind of explained it to me. In literary citizenship, it's basically championing all writers, everybody that's creating, but also at the same time, you know, promoting the consumption of literature. I wish I didn't have to say consumption, but, you know, promoting new things, getting them out there, helping them spread the word and find readership. And for you, you do this all the time. I've just trying to look for interviews with you to prep for this. There's like 50 reviews that you've done, and, you know, curating interviews and all of this other kind of, you know, background work of being in the writing realm. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what, you know, literary citizenship means to you, and, you know, maybe share some of your most rewarding moments from that practice.
Sure. Yeah, no, I believe very heavily in the writer in the world, and I believe so much in community that I don't even think I have to say it. It's just a part of who I am. I think I'm also an extrovert, so I'm also very sort of outward bound, and so I need and crave that sort of connection with other people that are doing similar things or interested in things that I'm interested in order to live. I feel like it's not, I mean, it's not all sort of give. I feel like I get a lot out of it too. But I think it's such an important part of what I think a writer should be in the world, that, you know, I will spend all of my spare time helping other people. You know, and I don't, being a writer, I know that most people aren't like that, you know, but there are people like that too. You know, we kind of know who these people are. We're all kind of cut from that kind of cloth too. I don't need to help anyone. I don't need to do anything for anyone. But all I do all day long is help other people. You know, like emails come by, people I don't know. I don't know you. You know, I answer your messages. I do that with everyone. And I think it's just, you know, within reason. I think it's important to me, because I feel like, what are we doing otherwise? It's like we're not writing in our own diaries. You know, we're writing words to send them into the world. Well, the world is where literature lies, and I feel like that's such an important part of who I am as a writer too. It helps me if I'm doing an interview, you know, on someone. I have to think about them and their writing, and it gets me to think critically about what's important, and then it comes back to me when I'm writing my own work. When I write a book review, it's the same thing. I've had to think very critically about someone else's work, and that comes back to my own work. I flexed certain kinds of muscles, things have fired in my own brain that wouldn't have otherwise. And so I think I'm a very curious person. So I think a lot of the things I do are, like book reviews and interviews are curiosities. It's like, I want to know more. I want to know why I like this so much. Or I'm interested in this. It's like, can I just get to know this person better? Can I explain to the world or share this? Like when I do interviews, I want to share like what I like about this particular writer with other people. And sometimes it's actually, I like to do interviews with people I know really well too, because I feel like it's about access. It's like, when I first started writing, I didn't know anybody, and being sort of an Asian American BIPOC writer, it's like access was always a big issue. I saw no one in journals that looked like me, and until very recently, did people even have allow people like me into the field of writing, kind of thing. Yet I've been writing for 25 years probably, and so for me, it's like the community aspect is about access. And so it's like if I now I have like friends in the writing world that are super talented and interesting, and it's like, well, I know these people. I'd love to interview them, and I also know things about them. I could sort of tease things out, and then I could share those relationships with the world and insights that I get to experience now. So yeah, I do a lot of things to give back to the community, and I give back way more than I was ever given. Not that many people really helped me early on. And everything I think I've done, it's like a lot of it's because I've just worked hard on my own and just never really gave up, because I've always really loved writing. But I didn't have a lot of support. I didn't have a lot of help. And I didn't know people, and I was working outside of the literary world. And so now that I'm firmly in it, unfortunately, firmly in it, it's like I want to give back as much as I can. And in the time that I have remaining is like, it's like I don't want to be that person that sits like on a pedestal that no one else can touch or reach. What's the point of that? It's like that's all about ego. And for me, writing is never about the ego. It's like it's never about fame, fortune, ego. It's never about that. And so it's like, if you have any of those things, then I feel like you should give it all back times 10. That's sort of just who I am, and I don't need anything in return. Like I don't need anything. I don't need favors. It's like I'm not a politician, and so and it's like if this all disappeared, it wouldn't matter to me either. So it's like I think that's just who I am, and I think if I weren't doing poetry, I'd be doing something else, and it'd be the same thing. Just be community in a different.
So building a community basically is the the takeaway from that is that's literary citizenship, and all of those things that you do for other writers, friends, or taking this interview, for instance, it's all to build a more actionable, active community.
Absolutely. It's political when you think about it. Like choosing to be active and to give things back is a political statement. It's activism in some ways. Like maybe some person will listen to you in my interview and it could change their life in some way. It's like, and I could care less, like if they buy my book or whatever. Like it's not for my fame or anything like that. I don't really need anything, but I think it's like it's important to me, to just, I don't know, it's important for me to help people, and I think I have that impulse to sort of help people with whatever they want to do. It's like if I can help you, I'll try. I don't really see why I wouldn't, if that makes sense. It's just it's part of who I am. It's like I think it's that kind of connector personality. Like if I have a contact that might help you, or someone I know, or something, or a book even, it's like I'll just give it to you. It's just I don't know. I'm not a hoarder. I don't hoard things. I'm not selfish. I'm not sort of as focused on myself. Sometimes I wish I were more, because I do spend a lot of time helping other people. So I think I should probably do more things for my own kids or my own self, but I don't know how to do that. Like I just spread myself too thin. But I think ultimately I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us into the next question: teaching. You're on the faculty at Antioch, and I mean, being active in as a literary citizen and doing all of those extra things and connecting people on the interviews and granting access to the literary spaces that you've done, is teaching different from that, or do you feel it's kind of in the same sphere as helping people develop?
It's insane. Yeah, it's in helping people develop for sure. I run the program too, and so it's like I touch 100 of our students and 1,000 of our alums. Not every single person, but like I actually am the program chair of the program, and I also teach on occasion at Antioch. But I also do a lot of other teaching in the community, so like conferences and workshops and stuff like that.
And has that experience opened up anything in your own creative practice, teaching like that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I definitely think like, I mean, teaching is kind of like, is sort of, I don't know, it's like I actually love teaching young people. So it's not that I don't like teaching MFA students, or adults. But I really do like teaching young people. So I would say undergraduate students or younger is kind of my sweet spot. And I think the reason why is because they're such new people, and you can have such an impact on their lives in ways that teachers had a big impact on my life. And you don't even, like, the teachers I had in high school who introduced me to Emily Dickinson and, like, made me memorize poems and, made us read Hemingway. It's like, it's not like they were like all these amazing teachers. I mean, they were pretty good actually, but it's not like they paid so much attention to me. It was just me just sitting in a class with 40 other people and soaking this stuff in. What an impact they had on me though, and so, and college teachers too. It's like they help me become a better person and a broader person. And I think that when I'm teaching younger people, I feel like I have such an impact on them, that I've shaped them in ways that I've changed their lives in some ways, just even bringing in this poem or that poem or talking to them in a certain way about what they want to do after they graduate or something like that. It's like, you can really, really change someone's life. Yeah. It's really cool, actually. And so, yeah, I think that's where I like teaching. MFA students, I like teaching too, but they're a little more angst, like they're always a little worried about their like the next steps and the career aspects of things, and so you're dealing with more anxieties, and that's a little harder. And because I can't guarantee anything for anyone, in an MFA program, but I just try and keep people focused on the writing. But that can be hard because, you have an MFA, you know how much anxiety you have at that stage that you're at. And people are like, am I good enough? Is my writing good? It's like, whereas in high school or college, it's just like, they're just writing and they're just learning about themselves. And so it's a different kind of person. But, I think it's all related. I think it's all, and I do a lot of stuff in my job at Antioch that no one asks me to do. And I just do it because I know it's better for the students. And so I add a lot of things to my plate that no one asks me to and I don't have to do. Because I want to make everyone's experience as good as it can be. Because I'm kind of I think I'm kind of a perfectionist. And so I think if I can make something better, I kind of like it, I'll just make it better. So yeah, it is all kind of related. My mother was a teacher. She was a high school teacher. My grandmother was a teacher, I guess. I didn't know it. But I think there are a lot of teachers in my family too. So I think that it's, I never really thought about it before. But it makes sense to me now looking back on it.
Cool. Thank you for that. What are two important actions a practicing or emerging writer can do to be a good literary citizen?
I sometimes make my students write book reviews. So I think writing book reviews is a great way to be a great literary citizen. I also think that, doing interviews is also another way of being a good literary citizen. I think, I also think following people on social media and then if you read their book telling them that you liked it is being a good literary citizen. I think uplifting other writers on social media is also being a good literary citizen. That's 4.
Why should writers explore different forms, sonnets, say, or something like ekphrasis? Do you think they should, if you think they should?
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, I'm an experimenter, so I absolutely think you should try everything at least once. I mean, you only have to write a sonnet one time to say you've done it. When what is it going to harm you? So why not? Absolutely, it stretches your brain. Things happen, things can fire in your brain that when you're forced to try something new.
And is there a challenge that you would issue? Is it like write an ekphrastic piece or write a sonnet, or is there some form that you would challenge an emerging writer to try?
I love sestinas. So yes, I think people should try writing a sestina. The trick with a sestina is you have to pick good end words. And so pick your words first. And the bigger and more malleable and expansive and multi-meaning those words can be, the more fun you're going to have writing the sonnet, the sestina.
Cool. Thank you. All right. This is the hard one. Does writing poetry take you outside of time?
Absolutely. Yes. I think that writing poetry to me is the purest art form because it's so outside of time. I don't think it considers time. I think it's also in between time. I think sometimes it can be time. It could be underneath time. It could be all sorts of things. I think it's really the most imaginative thing that I can imagine doing. And I think that's what's so bizarre about it is that it can't be pinned down.
And do you think, how do you think a poem lasts? I was reading, I don't know what I was reading today, I think it was something you shared on your Twitter about how, some writers that stand the test of time quiz or whatever it is, if your writing lasts, then you were a good writer. Do you think that, is there any poetry or anything that you're reading that's kind of asynchronous with, it was published in 1870, but it's, exactly on target today? Is there anything in your mind that you are reading or have read that's like that for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think determining what things last or thinking about whether things will last is complicated, and it's also very political. I think so much of what lasts is what people push and the canon, right? And what certain populations of people say we have to read. It's all, I think those are human made. I think there are a ton of writers that could have lasted, but it's not like things just last on their own. It's not like something in nature, like a tree in the middle of nowhere will last, and how come that one will die? I mean, it's like there are no humans around. Well, it just happens, right? In literature, in poetry, it doesn't just happen. It's just like these hands come into play. Like who's getting to choose what to last and why is a very important question. I think that one must really think about and deconstruct. So I don't really believe that things last are necessarily best, or I don't really believe in that stuff. But to your other question, I think what's interesting and what feels like contemporary, I do sometimes read like stuff that's really old, and I'm like, wow, that seems so new already, and hence like people like Virginia Woolf, Gertrude Stein, like those kinds of writers always seem really amazing to me, and I was like, wow, they're writing so long ago, and I love their work today, So I do think that I tend to like more sort of forward-thinking, innovative artists, period. Whether it's visual art or, I'm always looking at things a little ahead, and I admire people who are like way ahead, like true visionaries. I'm just always a little bit jogging ahead, but there are people who are like, they're in outer space, and we're just going to catch up to them in 100 years, kind of thing. We don't know who those people are. They're just, we'll find out we will find out. Yeah. Somebody else will find out. So yeah, I think I don't really think about me, lasting. I could give a crap. Yeah, I'm like, I'm not going to care. I'm going to be dead.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
yeah.
Cool. I think we can call it there. Oh, can't. Last one. If you could give an emerging poet one piece of advice, what would it be?
Always try and remember why you started writing. And then, ask yourself what you like about writing, almost like a daily practice, because the writing world can be very brutal and it can be very discouraging, and you can get very angry and bitter and upset and sad and all those different emotions in the face of all sorts of things like rejections and drama. There's so much drama all the time, right? But I don't know. I always like to think it's like, well, I don't care about all of that. I just like to write. I mean, why did I start writing? Why do I sit down and write? And I just remind myself, it's like, that's why I do this. It's not for all of that other stuff. And other stuff can give me a headache sometimes. And so I think that's the advice I would give, is stay true to that first feeling that you had, when you found that perfect line or perfect word. And don't ever forget that feeling, and that's why you come back.